Welcome back, Crackle Addicts. I'm Lupinefiasco. This is Daily FaB Gameplay, and today we are playing Aurora Shooting Star. For anyone who is new to the channel, what we do here is review replays of games I played on the Talishar.net client days or weeks ago, after enough time has passed that I lose my bias and can more objectively judge the quality of my games. I will talk through turn cycles as if I were taking them now, explaining my thought processes for the lines I would take, and compare that to the lines I did take. We either learn from my mistakes or reinforce good play patterns with the overall goal of tightening and optimizing our gameplay in the future, taking down paper events, and walking away with that shiny cardboard. If you would like to check out the deck I'm playing here or try it for yourself on Talishar, there is a FaB deck link in the video description below. While you're down there, if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to my channel. It is the best free way to support me and to make sure that you see daily FaB gameplay in your video feed 5 days a week. If you'd like to engage further, there is a link to my Discord and to my Patreon. Without further ado, let's jump right into the action. If you commented on my Win This Game video last week, thank you so much. Those comments were extremely helpful, and I wish I had had them for this game, which is a part of that same series. We are going second in this game, having just lost the last match. I like the equipment loadout, I like Dyadic and Snapdragons. My theory going second in an aggro mirror is that we want to be as consistent as possible. That because we are starting going second, we are already ahead, and our entire plan is just staying ahead. We don't need to take risks, which means that I actually want to experiment with cutting Sigil of Suffering. And I would like to board it out for Blast to Oblivion. The idea being that our Blast to Oblivion triggers will either affect our Channel Lightning Valleys, which lets us keep them around for longer because we don't need to care about paying the flow cost for that turn, or we are bouncing our opponent's embodiment of lightning, which will slow them down and keep them less consistent. And with our opponent on Lightning Greaves instead of Snapdragon Scalers, getting their embodiments off of the board is potentially much more helpful than the Sigil of Suffering potentially only blocking for 3. We see our opponent is on Spring Tunic. If they have that Tunic around for the Sigil turn, then they can just use the Tunic to pay for Sigil. But as far as opening hands go, this is pretty good. If our opponent just passes, we do have the option to play Discharge and then pitch Heaven's Claws to Aurora. But even without doing that, this hand is very good. We can attack with Starfall, then play Discharge. Depending on whether the Starfall hits, we either second strike for 7 go again, Aurora, pass, and Arsenal Sigil, or if the Starfall gets blocked, we activate Grasp, then attack with second strike for 6, and potentially 7. I do like blocking with the Heaven's Claws here. I think there's an option for us to block with second strike, take 1 point of damage, but we are practically guaranteed to be able to make an embodiment this turn by playing our Discharge and then pitching our Heaven's Claws. And second strike currently does not have go again, can't really get go again because we had not been dealt damage when second strike attacked. So unless our Aurora has Blink in hand, this is the only thing she's doing this turn. If the second strike gets lightning pressed, we could play Sigil of Suffering, which our opponent can pitch for, sure, but maybe it then puts them into a position, if they have 2 reds, that they can't just pitch both of them into Aurora. So I think blocking with second strike is a little better. We potentially take damage, but we are putting ourselves into a better position to make an embodiment on our opponent's turn. They play Electromagnetic Somersault here, and take a really interesting line where they are, in fact, going to bounce our Heaven's Claws as well as their second strike. And given what our hand looks like, that's very good for us because we get to play our Discharge and then pitch Heaven's Claws to Aurora. But I like the idea because if our opponent is attacking us and we're blocking, it means that we're blocking with the worst card in our hand. And maybe we really wanted to get this Heaven's Claws out of our hand so we could draw something new, but by somersaulting it back into our hand, we don't get to do that. So here it really didn't work very well for our opponent, but in general, I could see where that becomes a really neat play. Florian comes to mind where, say we attack, we're trying to filter, maybe make an embodiment, and the enemy Florian blocks with a few Earth cards to try to fill their graveyard. Well, if we can somersault those back to hand, then Florian doesn't get to fill the graveyard, and maybe if he was blocking with red Earth cards and now we put those red Earth cards back into his hand, maybe he doesn't have a blue, and so his turn becomes much worse. It's a really neat line, and I enjoyed seeing it here. As far as pitching goes, I'm just going to pitch the Heaven's Claws in this game because I am, in my opinion, overvaluing Sigil of Suffering. If I was making this call now, I would like to pitch Sigil of Suffering to get it out of my hand, but based on my current Aurora list that I'm going to be talking about in a video later this week, the Sigil of Suffering would be Blast to Oblivion. I think that is where I want to be in the Aurora mirror going second, so I actually would pitch Second Strike and Heaven's Claws to make my embodiment, to give me more opportunity to draw an instant. If I could play Blast to Oblivion with Go Again and then play an instant to trigger the Blast effect and bounce my opponent's embodiment of lightning, that is a really good play that I would really like to make. But we do only pitch the Heaven's Claws. I think it's totally defensible, but again, I'm really coming down on Sigil of Suffering when I'm going second, and I just want to make sure that I keep tempo. So here we do see, well, if this Sigil was Blast to Oblivion, we have a pretty cool line where we could play Flittering Charge for 4 Go Again. If it hits, we get to play Second Strike for 4 Go Again, then we get to play Blast to Oblivion, somersault it, bounce our opponent's embodiment of lightning, pick up our Blast to Oblivion, and arsenal it. We get a 3-card 12, a 4-card 12, but with an arsenal left behind, and I think that's really neat. For this turn here, it's basically the same line. We are going to make kind of a risky call where we play Flittering Charge, have it get Go Again from the embodiment of lightning, and we're really counting on it hitting. So it's risky because the Flittering Charge could get blocked by a Sigil of Suffering, or maybe our opponent's hand is just terrible, and they put 2 blocks in front of the Flittering, or a 3 block and Lightning Greaves. The point is that we really want Flittering Charge to hit. The safe line here is Second Strike for 3 Go Again, Flittering Charge, somersault the Flittering, and then play it again, and it's a 3-card 11. We get a 3-card 12 if the Flittering Charge hits, because then Second Strike attacks for 4 Go Again, but if the Flittering Charge gets blocked, then our best damage for the rest of the turn is just 6, and that is because we would somersault the Flittering back to hand, we would pitch Second Strike to attack with Starfall for 2, and then we would play Flittering for 4. So my line with leading with Flittering, if the Flittering gets blocked, we get a 3-card 10. The safe line leading with Second Strike is a 3-card 11, and then the upside, the big line, is Flittering does not get blocked, and we get a 3-card 12. So I think going for the big play when we're ahead is fine, but just noting that, for one thing, we cannot easily pay for Sigil of Suffering. Not that we would want to, but we know that our opponent plays 4 blocks. So just knowing that if this Flittering gets blocked, we are losing 1 point of value from the safe line that we could have taken by leading with Second Strike. Thankfully, it doesn't get blocked, so we do get to attack with Second Strike for 4 Go Again. We get to pick it up and put it back in hand. And we are going to arsenal this Sigil of Suffering. Keeping in mind, this turn looks totally different if it's Blast to Oblivion, but that we would be arsenaling this card either way. Either it's Blast or it is Sigil. But here you see why I really want to be playing Blast to Oblivion when I'm going second and I'm at an advantage. Now, this hand is not good kind of no matter what, right? Even if we're going first and we need to catch up on tempo, we don't want to see all of the sigils in one hand, and we especially don't want to see any of our sigils when we don't already have Channel Lightning Valley. But when we're behind, hey, getting our 4 value, potentially 5 value, and slowing our opponent down because we are making them pitch into our Sigil of Suffering is really cool. That is something we want to be doing. It benefits us to slow down our opponent. But when we are going second and we are already ahead, how we can fall behind is when we draw these hands that don't convert very well. Our opponent has 2 floating resources. They can just pay into both of these Sigil of Sufferings, and yeah, maybe they don't make an embodiment of lightning, but we can also look at their tunic and see it's about to be on 3. They could pay into Lightning Greaves with the tunic and potentially have a very big turn, so them paying 2 and missing out on the embodiment is really not the worst thing in the world for them. And maybe they have an underwhelming turn, they just pass back to us, and now we have these sigils that we can't really do anything with. If we end up not needing to block it all this turn, then we cannot convert 4 cards. Our 4-card turn would be pitch 2 sigils into Grasp of the Arknight, play Discharge, attack with Ravenous Rabble. That isn't good. And while we will get to use at least one of these sigils defensively, it is potentially only worth 3, where Blast to Oblivion is definitely worth 4, and potentially worth even more if we're getting an embodiment of lightning off the board. As far as blocking this Starfall, I think putting Dyadic Carapace in front of it is fine. Maybe our opponent only has Electrostatic Discharge. Maybe they have a terrible hand, and the play is Electromagnetic Somersault. They do have the Channel Lightning Valley, so this line becomes very good, where we do prevent the draw, and we have these Sigils of Suffering that we can potentially use to deny our opponent a draw. But here we are in a really bad spot where we cannot guarantee that these Sigils of Suffering will block for 4. So we're in a weird spot now. We could block with 1. See, maybe our opponent doesn't pay for it. Maybe they really want to make an embodiment and they just take the point of damage, lose out on the draw. I'm pretty sure they're going to pay. So if they do pay, well, then what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to block with the second Sigil of Suffering? Maybe our opponent doesn't pay for it, keeps 1 resource around, and then plays whatever this last card in their hand is. Maybe. But we are just in this weird spot now where what are we supposed to do with these 2 sigils? I think the line is supposed to be, we definitely play 1 and see what our opponent does with it. And I think if they pay, we are supposed to play the second one, and we just feel bad that we aren't getting our full value from it. But maybe we are just supposed to be okay with value math working out in our favor, that we spend 3 points of value to essentially deny them 4 points of value. It's just weird. I think we are supposed to sigil here just to get our value, and we're getting 3 points of value on defense rather than 2 points of value on offense. Our turn is just Discharge, Rabble, Arsenal, Sigil. But we feel bad that that is what we're doing. Now, notably, if this Sigil was Blast to Oblivion, then we are not excited to play it because we don't want to return our opponent's Channel Lightning Valley to their hand. We want them to have to pay the flow cost. But kind of just overall, you're seeing these Sigils of Suffering are not doing the thing that we want them to do. We want them to be generating 5 points of value overall between 4 points of defense and 1 point of offense, and drawing us cards with Channel Lightning Valley. But when they aren't doing that, we're just falling behind on value, and we're already ahead from going second. We just want to stay ahead. We don't need to play catch up. Opponent opening with Burn Up Shock and playing a second Channel Lightning Valley. This is a case where I really want to pitch into AB2. I mean, I don't want to, but we have this Channel Lightning Valley in hand, and I want to deny my opponent the ability to draw 2 leading into a burn up turn. I am very interested in preventing damage this turn for the burn up and for the 2 Channel Lightning Valleys. So as much as I want to channel Sigil, there are 2 reasons I think it's more important to pitch. The first being that this burn up is representing 2 card draws into a burn-up turn. But more than that, because our opponent has Tunic up, we cannot assume that we are going to actually deal arcane damage with the Sigil of Suffering. If this Tunic was down and I don't know that my opponent has a blue, then I'm all for trying to make this happen. But in this case, the burn up represents 2-draw. Maybe our opponent's hand is terrible. We don't know what the card in their arsenal is. They didn't show that to us. It might be Second Strike. The Second Strike from their first turn that they somersaulted back to hand. And if that's true, then denying this burn up actually says that we are also denying the Second Strike from having go again. We can cover 4 points of damage from Dyadic Carapace and the Sigil of Suffering in our arsenal. We can also block with Crown of Providence and try to turn one of these instants in our hand into a card that blocks. And we also have Grasp plus Second Strike to cover another 4. I think this is a turn that I'm really interested in saying I'm committing heavy resources to stopping these draws and this burn up, because this is how our opponent is going to catch up in this game. And our Channel Sigil does not do enough to keep us ahead. It isn't even guaranteed to work. We do let it go through. I think this is a big mistake. What it also means is there is no way we're going to stop this burn up. So I am not going to try. And that means that I am just kind of looking for value here. I'm really hoping that maybe our opponent's plan... We cannot guarantee that the Sigil hits, and that's really the long and short of it, unfortunately. Which means that what I am probably looking at doing this turn is pitching Electrostatic Discharge to attack with Starfall. I'm going to play the Channel Lightning Valley, hope that the Starfall hits, and I get to draw a card. And then I'm going to Second Strike, play Lightning Press. And I want to keep this Sigil in my arsenal because I want my opponent to put themselves into a position where on their next turn they use Spring Tunic to pay for a Starfall, and that's when I can get them with the Sigil of Suffering. Overall, we're just in a bad spot. But I think that we are now in a position where we're falling behind. We should not block with the Sigil of Suffering. We should play for getting ahead with the Starfall Channel Lightning play, and just hoping that our opponent is in a spot where they maybe get a little greedy, don't block the Starfall with Grasp. You see me undo there. We don't need to play the Channel Lightning when our opponent has already used their Spring Tunic, because that means they are definitely going to use the Arcane Barrier, and we can just not show them that we have the Channel Lightning. There's no reason to. I think pitching Press here is a mistake. We should be pitching the Discharge instead. If only because the Starfall doesn't hit, then we would attack with our Second Strike and then Press gets it over a block. The reason to pitch Press and attack with Starfall is to hedge, where if our opponent blocks the Starfall with Grasp, we can play Discharge, attack with Second Strike, and then Arsenal the Channel Lightning Valley. But I would rather push more damage and get my draw by dealing damage rather than hedging on my opponent playing it safe. We're in an interesting spot where we can decide to either somersault the Second Strike back to hand to arsenal it, or we can arsenal an electromagnetic somersault. We've seen enough non-attacks that I think we are likely to draw into at least 2 in our next hand, so that somersault will get more defensive value than offensive value. But because we have a Channel Lightning on the board, I am more interested in having an attack in my arsenal just to try and go wider on my next turn and try to draw more cards. You can see me doing the math here, just trying to figure out, is it worth somersaulting? Do I want to undo and just arsenal the somersault and try to get a little more value? But it is important to me that we try and push this offensive advantage and draw more with Channel Lightning Valley. So we pick up the second strike. We're just going to tuck that into our arsenal. We're still kind of ahead on life, but the thing is, our opponent has a 6-card hand, and we need to survive. We do draw into an Arc Lightning, which is okay. Our opponent has 3rd Channel Lightning Valley. I do want to point out that as much as I think I put myself into a bad spot this game with some poor sideboard choices, our opponent is drawing very well, right? If they stagger 3 Channel Lightning Valleys 3 turns in a row, that's a ton of value for us to overcome. And we could have played this game much better, especially on that last turn, not letting them draw with the burn up, and having Blast to Oblivion would help a lot more than having these Sigils of Suffering that have consistently blocked for 3. But let's not kid ourselves and say that our opponent is not drawing hot. I think the Crown of Providence play here is fine. I am putting myself in a position where I can block better on this turn if I need to. Our opponent is clearly going off. At the same time, that does feel like playing not to lose rather than playing to win. That second strike would have worked very well with our Arc Lightning, and I think it is likely better had we kept it rather than using our crown now. We could have just not done the crown. We could have waited on it. Potentially we will arsenal something at the end of our next turn, and maybe crowning that would have been better. You know, this Sigil of Solace comes to mind. Maybe our opponent bricks on their next hand, and we would rather turn Sigil into a card that attacks rather than 3 life from Arsenal. Who knows? I do think that crowning is fine, just not ideal, and at this point we are just locked into taking all of this damage, unless it would be lethal. We get to play Arc Lightning, play Arcanic Shockwave, fuse it with Heaven's Claws. We can then pitch the Heaven's Claws into Grasp of the Arknight. Rather what we would do is play Shockwave, fuse it, play second Shockwave, snap it, get more damage that way, and draw a card from the Channel Lightning Valley. We definitely are not blocking with this hand, and we do still have 3 life because it's Sigil of Solace. So we'll open with the Arc Lightning, see if our opponent wants to give us a blue for their Lightning Greaves, or just wants to let us draw a card. Either way, we're kind of ahead because we are going to be threatening quite a bit of physical damage, so having them give us a blue in pitch is pretty good for us. Now, drawing Warmongers here is absolutely atrocious. Had this been any other card in our deck, I would feel better about this hand, but just drawing another blue when we already have one is pretty terrible at this point in the game. There are a few things I want to do with this hand to maximize damage. The first is attack with Shockwave, fuse it with Heaven's Claws. At that point, I want to follow with pitch Warmongers into Aurora to make an embodiment of lightning, so I can attack with second Shockwave, fuse it with Heaven's Claws. That is representing 12 points of damage, 2 from each Shockwave ping, 8 from each Shockwave, and then another 2 from the Shockwaves having go again and triggering Arc Lightning. After the second Shockwave, I would pitch Heaven's Claws into Grasp with the Arknight, deal 1 from Arc Lightning and make a Rune Chant, use one of my 2 floating resources to attack with Starfall for 1 Arcane from the Rune Chant, 2 physical, and then 1 Arcane from Arc Lightning, and Arsenal Sigil of Solace. It isn't great. The second blue in Aurora is never good. It is never worth a full card because we cannot convert it. But it is the best way for me to use this hand while also keeping my Snapdragon Scalers. This kind of also works where we attack with Starfall for 1+2+1, then attack with Shockwave, fusing it with Heaven's Claws, and then pitching Heaven's Claws to Aurora. The thing is we miss 1 point of damage because we could have given the Shockwave go again with the Aurora embodiment. The difference is we would not be ending our turn with an embodiment of lightning. We would trade 1 damage for 1 embodiment at the end of the turn. But here's the thing, we still have our Snapdragon Scalers. We can give an attack go again. We're not concerned about unbricking a hand. So here we are just missing 1 point of damage. Not that it matters, let's not kid ourselves. Our opponent is at an effective 12 and still has 5 cards in hand. Here we have to pay into the Sigil of Suffering, just insult to injury. That they had the Sigil Channel Lightning at a time where it mattered, and that really is the game. Just not nearly enough damage output from our side of the table. Got a burn up here, I'm just going to concede. That's fine. I don't mind that. We see that our opponent got almost 4 more points of value per turn compared to what we did. That's what 3 Channel Lightnings, a burn up, and Arc Lightning will do for you. We definitely got outdrawn. I will not say that variance did not have something to do with how this game shook out, but I will say I don't think I boarded correctly. I think the Sigils of Suffering were actively detrimental to what I'm trying to do, which is start ahead and stay ahead. I think that we let our opponent get too much value out of their Channel Lightning value. We should have used our AB2 to try and stop their burn-up turn, which is really how they caught up to us. And overall, we could have just played a little tighter. Now, sometimes you are going to lose going second. You are favored in those games, but even with a 60-40%, sometimes you are the 40. But overall, we can definitely do this better. And some of my sideboard choices going forward are going to reflect that we are not going to be too beholden to the die roll. We are going to adjust based on that. I hope you enjoyed this game. I hope you learned something. If so, be sure to flittering charge at that like button. Comments are always open for any questions or feedback. If you haven't already done so, please consider a YouTube subscription. I have a Discord, I have a Blue Sky, and I have a Patreon. Those links are all in the video description below. Until the next time I see you on Daily FaB Gameplay, take care.